How are you doing? I asked for questions a couple of weeks ago. Invited you to ask questions about rugby league, anything that you wanted me to have a crack at answering. Not saying I'm right, but I'll have a go at it. And I've got quite a backlog now, so I'm going to put a couple of these out a week to make up. Just an apology, I've not been on this for a couple of weeks. The first week, really busy with aim higher and all that kind of thing. I thought, I'll do it in a couple of days. And then I made a first world error. I put the wrong guard on when I was trimming my beard and it went really short. Like I did a number 1 instead of a number 3 or a number 2. And I look so weird. You know, like when you've got a bit of facial hair or you've got hair and you cut it and at first you look weird for a couple of days. I was dead self-conscious. I didn't want to put myself on camera. Really unlike me, to be honest, because I normally don't care. But yeah, I look dead weird. You know, like you look dead weird in the face and people were saying to me, what's different about you, Lee? What's different about you? I was going, I don't know what you're on about. But anyway, I'm here. Cameron Bostock, one of our friends, followers and members, he asked a question. It was quite a long question, but the nuts and bolts of it were that the Broncos have pinned a lot of hopes on a lot of halves, and so have other teams like the West Tigers and New South Wales over the years and all that kind of thing, and they end up sort of letting you down. And basically, in a nutshell, he asked what makes a gun half. Well, I'm going to attack the expectation thing first. I think our media is still conditioned to think that the half is the person that engineers everything. Well, I know when I coach my team, I coach my whole team to talk about what they see and put as much emphasis on those players at the back than the halves and the hooker for the ball going somewhere. So there'll be an override call, there'll be a decoy call and all that kind of thing. Because they're the ones who have a better vision of things. If you think about a hooker, he's got his head up, or she's got their head up somebody's backside and they've not got a great view. The halves might be turning around, trying to organise something. All an outside back or a second rower or a prop or a wing has to do is look up, check the play the ball again, look up, check the play the ball again, catch and go. Right, so I put a lot of emphasis on those players to say what's going on. That means in my teams, the players who play 6 and 7 actually have less pressure on them. So the game might not break down around them. It might break down around other people. So the first answer to that, Cameron, is it's the pressure, it's the media expectation. They talk about it as if it's 2 quarterbacks. So some coaches still coach that, you know, it's about that 7 versus that 7. Delicherry Evans versus Ivan Cleary's son Nathan, or so on and so forth. And there's a second thing I want to attack, right? Number 2. The game went through a massive change in the early 90s and we just brush over it like it never happened. The game went from defences having to go back 5 metres to 10 metres, or 5 yards to 10 metres. That is a massive difference. Can you imagine a tennis court doubling in length? How would that change Roger Federer's serve? Can you imagine a cricket wicket doubling in length? How would that change a fast bowler's run-up and delivery? Do I need to go on? Can you imagine the distance that a half used to have to work in? They had to pull rabbits out the hat to break down that defence. They had to pull trick plays out. That's why your old halves, such as your Tommy Radonikis, your Peter Sterlings, your Alfie Langers, they look so skillful because they had to be. They had to come up with things to break down that defence. Now, there's a 10-metre gap between the teams to start. And if you get some momentum, that can be even bigger or more accessible. And I think what makes a good half, a really good half, personally, in the way I coach my teams, is ruck recognition. Knowing when the team is going backwards, the defensive team that is, when your team is going forward so you can push that ball a little bit wider. One basic game plan that I've used in the past, and I know some other good coaches have used in the past, is you get your nose through with your forwards or whoever might carry the ball up, your back 3, whatever it may be. Once you've got your nose through, you push the ball a little bit wider, and that's where your halves come in, and that's a ruck recognition thing. Getting your nose through is about getting passive tackles and getting a quick play the ball. And I think good halves these days are good at ruck recognition, and if they are good, they can play for big chunks of a game with a dinner suit on. What I tell my halves to do is to read the rucks and also have options around them all the time. And I think a good half is always organising the bodies around them. They're very direct. They tell players, I want you there, so on and so forth. I want you inside me. I want you to run that line, so on and so forth. A good half can also see 2, 3, 4 plays ahead. And again, that's about strategy rather than just tactics. So it might be 5 sets ahead too. So a good half can carry out that. When I think of some of the best halves that have played the game over the last 5, 10, 15 years, I'm a massive fan of Cooper Cronk. Massive fan. And he was a game manager. He was Craig Bellamy on the field. So there's some of the attacking things. And I think the key thing about half is they get the ball where it needs to go. They're not necessarily the star of the show. They're the one who put the ball in the hands of the stars in the best position. If I had Greg Inglis in my centres and I was a half, I'd give him as much early ball as I could. Yeah, so he could put footwork on people, for example. He wouldn't need a half that thinks they have to pull a rabbit out of the hat and get the ball closer to the line. There's also a lot to be said for the closeness and depth away from the line. The closer you get to the line, either the shorter your pass has to be or go right out the back. You see a lot of that now, and I think the worst halves get that mixed up. So many halves only have a short passing game. That's the other thing I want to mention. They don't go long. Have a look at an NRL game and have a look how much space is at the last defender, the second last defender, the third last defender, what we call the 1 in, the 2 in and the 3 in defenders. And so many halves try and hit the crash ball all the time. It's a pandemic in rugby league that's been going for years. On top of that, we've got the kicking game. The kicking game, the half knows where to put the ball. They know the weaknesses or the strengths of the fullback. They know which side and which foot they step best on or worst on, or which side to kick it on, and that's from homework. And their kicks are consistent, and the kick goes where you need it to go all the time. I think one of the problems, Cameron, is our media put too much pressure on our halves. I think sometimes our coaches and our teams respond to that. And I think a well-oiled machine, the half is just somebody who puts the ball where it needs to go. And of course, there's always that moment when everything is moving and they push the ball wide and they push the ball wide and the defence thinks that they're not doing anything but passing. And then all of a sudden, they're square and they just go boom through the line. And it's that shock factor. You see some rubbish in the media sometimes about how the halves aren't running enough and all that kind of thing. It's about knowing when and where to run. It's not a straightforward answer, Cameron. There's a lot to it, but I hope that's giving you some idea. And why are the halves at Broncos not firing? Well, I think sometimes it's because of the media pressure and the negative responses to that. I'm a massive fan of Tom Dearden. I think Brisbane should build their future around him, whereas as I talk now, there's talk of Cowboys and this, that and the other. I'm a massive Tom Dearden fan. He needs time in the team. And when they had Tom Dearden and Brodie Croft in the team recently, they had a better field balance. It was a partnership. It wasn't all about Anthony Milford. And that poor fella, they're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. He isn't an organiser. He's more of a runner. He's more of an instinctive player. So let him do what he wants to do. Does that answer some of your question, Cameron? I hope it does. And I will attack some of these questions over the next few days. Do you like the haircut? And do you like the beard? See ya.